Imagine waking up one morning believing your future was brighter than ever. You had money invested in the stock market. Your job felt secure. Your family was planning vacations, buying new cars, and dreaming about the future. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. In October 1929, America experienced one of the worst financial disasters in modern history. Millions watched their savings disappear in a matter of hours. Businesses shut their doors. Banks collapsed. Families who had lived comfortably suddenly found themselves standing in long lines just to receive a loaf of bread. This wasn't simply a market crash. It became a decade-long economic nightmare known as the Great Depression. Nearly 1 in every 4 American workers lost their jobs. Children went hungry. Farmers lost their land. Entire towns struggled to survive. Yet from this darkness emerged stories of courage, resilience, and hope that would forever change the United States. This is the story of the Great Depression, and the people who lived through America's hardest decade. Before the Great Depression came one of America's most exciting decades, the Roaring Twenties. Cities buzzed with jazz music. New skyscrapers reached toward the sky. Automobiles rolled off assembly lines faster than ever before. Radios connected families across the nation. Many Americans believed prosperity would never end. Banks eagerly offered loans. Investors borrowed money to buy stocks. Newspapers celebrated rising markets almost every day. Ordinary workers, teachers, shopkeepers, and even farmers invested everything they had into Wall Street. But beneath the excitement, dangerous cracks were already forming. Companies became wildly overvalued. People bought stocks with borrowed money, believing prices could only go up. America was building an economic bubble, one that was about to burst. October 29, 1929. A date forever remembered as Black Tuesday. Panic spread through Wall Street. Investors rushed to sell millions of shares. Prices collapsed faster than anyone imagined. Phones rang non-stop. Brokers shouted desperately across crowded trading floors. Fortunes built over years disappeared before lunch. Nearly 16 million shares changed hands in one day, a record at the time. Some people fainted. Others stood silently in disbelief as everything they owned vanished. The crash didn't cause the Great Depression by itself, but it shattered confidence across the nation and triggered a financial domino effect that would change history. After the market crashed, fear spread from Wall Street to neighborhood banks across America. People rushed to withdraw every dollar they had, but banks had invested much of that money or loaned it to others. They simply didn't have enough cash on hand to satisfy everyone at once. As panic grew, long lines formed outside bank doors before sunrise. Some waited for hours, hoping to save their life savings. Many were too late. Thousands of banks failed during the early years of the Depression. Families who had spent decades building financial security suddenly found their accounts wiped out. Businesses couldn't borrow money to stay open. Factories closed. Employers laid off workers. Entire communities felt the shock. The financial system that Americans trusted had begun to collapse. As jobs disappeared and savings vanished, millions of Americans faced a frightening question every morning: how would they eat today? Across cities like New York, Chicago, Detroit, and St. Louis, breadlines stretched for blocks. Men wearing worn-out coats stood silently in freezing weather, hoping to receive a small loaf of bread or a bowl of soup. Charities, churches, and volunteers worked tirelessly, serving thousands of meals every day. But even they struggled to meet the overwhelming need. Families who had once owned comfortable homes now packed their belongings into small makeshift shelters built from scrap wood, cardboard, tin, and discarded materials. These settlements became known as Hoovervilles, named after President Herbert Hoover, whom many Americans blamed for failing to stop the economic collapse. Entire communities sprang up beside rivers, railroad tracks, and empty lots. Children played in the dirt while parents searched desperately for work. Despite unimaginable hardship, neighbors often shared what little food they had, proving that kindness could survive even in the darkest times. Across America, survival became a daily challenge. Yet the determination of ordinary people would become one of the defining stories of the Great Depression. As if the economic crisis wasn't devastating enough, another disaster struck America's heartland. Beginning in the early 1930s, years of severe drought combined with poor farming practices transformed millions of acres of fertile farmland into dry, lifeless dust. Powerful winds carried enormous black clouds of soil across the Great Plains. Entire towns disappeared beneath walls of dust so thick they blocked out the sun. Families sealed windows with blankets and towels, but the fine dirt still found its way inside. It covered tables, beds, clothing, even food. Crops failed year after year. Livestock died. Farmers who had worked the land for generations were forced to abandon their homes. Hundreds of thousands packed everything they owned into old trucks and headed west toward California, hoping to find work and a fresh start. The journey was long, uncertain, and often heartbreaking. The Dust Bowl became one of the greatest environmental disasters in American history, reminding the nation that economic hardship and natural catastrophe could strike at the same time. By 1933, Americans were desperate for change. That year, Franklin Delano Roosevelt became the 32nd President of the United States, promising the nation a New Deal. Roosevelt believed the federal government had a responsibility to help struggling citizens and restore confidence in the economy. One of his first actions was temporarily closing banks, inspecting their finances, and reopening only those that were financially stable. The move helped calm widespread panic. His administration launched massive public works programs that built roads, bridges, schools, parks, dams, and airports across the country. Millions of unemployed Americans found jobs through these government projects, earning wages while rebuilding the nation's infrastructure. Roosevelt also spoke directly to the American people through his famous fireside chats on the radio, explaining complex issues in simple language. Families gathered around their radios, finding reassurance in a calm, confident voice during uncertain times. While the New Deal did not end the Great Depression overnight, it restored hope and reshaped the relationship between Americans and their government for generations to come. By the late 1930s, signs of recovery slowly began to appear. Factories reopened. Consumer confidence gradually returned. Unemployment declined, though millions were still struggling. Then, in 1939, a new global conflict erupted, World War II. Although tragic beyond measure, the war dramatically increased demand for American factories to produce ships, airplanes, vehicles, weapons, and supplies. Millions of workers returned to factories, many finding steady employment for the first time in years. Industrial production surged, businesses expanded, and the American economy finally regained its momentum. By the early 1940s, the Great Depression had effectively come to an end. After more than a decade of hardship, sacrifice, and perseverance, America had begun one of the greatest economic recoveries in its history. The Great Depression officially ended decades ago, but its lessons continue to shape America today. It transformed banking regulations, strengthened financial oversight, expanded Social Security, and changed the role of the federal government in protecting citizens during times of crisis. For the generation that lived through it, the experience left a lasting mark. Many became lifelong savers, avoiding unnecessary debt and never taking stable employment for granted. Parents who endured hunger taught their children the value of hard work, resilience, and preparing for difficult times. The Great Depression wasn't just an economic collapse, it was a human story. It was the story of families who refused to give up, of neighbors helping neighbors, of communities rebuilding together, of a nation discovering strength through adversity. Today, nearly a century later, the Great Depression remains a powerful reminder that even the darkest chapters in history can inspire resilience, innovation, and hope. If history teaches us anything, it's this: economies may rise and fall. Markets may crash. Challenges will always come, but the determination of ordinary people has the power to rebuild even the strongest nation. Thank you for watching.